Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's
Remember
exactly
this. You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you?
You're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing.
As an American, I will never not feel shame when I see that. But it was important to show it to you again. Hi, everybody. It's now 5 o'clock in New York. It will go down as one of the most defining moments, not just of Trump's second presidency, but of American political history. A shocking and gross display of inhospitality in the Oval Office from an American president attacking a Democratic ally who has been defending itself against a brutal invasion from Russia for the past 3 years. Donald Trump's seemingly premeditated ambush of Ukrainian President Zelensky was the first in a string of actions taken by the Trump administration that left the woman who'd been serving as America's ambassador to Ukraine since 2022, Bridget Brink, no choice but to resign that post, something she did last month. In an op-ed in the Detroit Free Press, Ambassador Brink wrote about her decision this, quote, I respect the president's right and responsibility to determine U.S. foreign policy with proper checks and balances by U.S. Congress. It is the role of America's Foreign Service to execute that policy. Unfortunately, the policy since the beginning of the Trump administration has been to put pressure on the victim, Ukraine, rather than on the aggressor, Russia. That is exactly what we saw in the Oval Office. That is exactly what we saw earlier this week come to pass when Donald Trump held a 2-hour call with Russian President Vladimir Putin and appeared to give Putin just what Putin wanted, not demanding an immediate ceasefire and agreeing for the U.S. to step back, to be a little less involved in negotiations. From reporting in the New York Times, quote, for many Ukrainians, the call was the last gasp of a chaotic process that few believed had any chance of success as long as Washington refused to pressure Moscow. And that means the devastating war will rage on. New exclusive reporting in the Wall Street Journal reveals what was going on in Trump's head during all of this. Quote, on a call Monday, President Trump told European leaders that Russian President Vladimir Putin isn't ready to end the war in Ukraine because he thinks he's winning. That's according to senior European officials familiar with the conversation. European leaders had long believed this, but it was the first time they were hearing it from Donald Trump, these officials said. It also ran counter to what Trump has often said publicly, that he believes Putin genuinely wants peace. That's where we start the hour with former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, Bridget Brink. Madam Ambassador, thank you for being here with us. How are you doing?
Hi, Nicole. Thanks so much for having me on.
What is your thought on Donald Trump's seeming belief of two things that most people in the Foreign Service or foreign policy believe not to be true? One, that he can control Putin, and two, that Putin wants to end the war in Ukraine.
Well, I mean, first, let me say that I see no evidence that Putin wants to end the war in Ukraine. And in fact, I think he's stringing us along, trying to extend the possibility of negotiations in order to continue to fight on the battlefield.
Can you just take us through what you saw in your time as ambassador? Because of Donald Trump, largely, the country has come to know a lot of your predecessors, Ambassador Bill Taylor, Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch, and now we're getting to know you. Can you tell us a little bit about your time in Ukraine?
Yes, of course. During 3 years where I really proudly led our mission of very brave Ukrainians and Americans in Kyiv, what I saw was just simply horrifying. For 3 years, Russia launched thousands of missiles and drones at Ukraine every single day, every single night, which killed men, women, and children in their sleep, in their homes, on playgrounds. For 3 years, I saw Russia launch the same missiles and drones at the critical energy infrastructure to try to take out the heat, light, and water for millions of people in the dead of Ukrainian winter. And also, I saw the terrible atrocities that Russian troops committed that are not things that we have seen since World War II. So as a result of that, I agree that the war needs to end. But the policy since the beginning of the Trump administration has been, as you have shown, to put pressure on the victim, Ukraine, rather than on the aggressor, Russia. And as I also said in my op-ed, peace at any price is not peace at all, it's appeasement. And history has shown us that that only leads to more war.
One of the atrocities that a lot of folks brought attention to on this program, including war photographers and former government officials, was the atrocity in Bucha, for which Vladimir Putin awarded medals to the Russian soldiers who carried that out and conjured it up. Marco Rubio wouldn't call Vladimir Putin a war criminal in testimony this week. Is Vladimir Putin a war criminal?
I mean, from my view and from the administration's view in the last administration, Vladimir Putin has committed crimes against humanity. That's a very serious set of crimes. And also, the Ukrainian authorities have found over 150,000 cases of war crimes and atrocities. So I don't know what the legal definition of a war criminal is, but I can't imagine someone responsible for all that who is not a war criminal.
It seems like the world, especially our European allies, had a minute to contemplate a second Trump presidency. But I wonder what your sort of peers in the diplomatic corps around the world think of America's Secretary of State, who have been a champion of Ukraine and its valor and the righteousness of its fight against Putin, and sat in that Oval Office meeting where I played some sound from, where Trump, his boss, and J.D. Vance, I guess his other boss, dressed down President Zelensky. What do diplomats and our allies make of Marco Rubio?
I mean, I would say diplomats, and I'm a former diplomat now, we're professionals. Our job is to advise the president and the administration and the secretary, and then execute foreign policy. And my experience in 28 years of diplomacy is that it's a strong and high level of professionalism, and that they're trying to give the best advice that they can in order to have policy that's good for the American people, that's smart foreign policy for the United States, not for other countries. I think the opinion of diplomats around the world, it probably depends on who they are. So European diplomats, I have responded with some concern over why our policy had changed in a way that was completely different, and also, instead of supporting Ukraine, siding with Russia as the aggressor. And maybe I'd just say a couple thoughts on why it's important to the United States. There are a number of reasons why the way in which this war ends matters to all Americans. Number one, Putin will not stop his aggression if he is successful in Ukraine. And I think that endangers our NATO allies, which we are treaty-bound to defend, bringing us even more involved into this terrible war. Second, it sends a terrible signal to China and other aggressors, which potentially unbalances security in Asia and around the world. Third, the EU is our largest trading partner. 16 million jobs on both sides of the Atlantic depend upon this relationship. And Russia is using this war to destabilize Europe and also our relationship with Europe. And finally, it's just not who we are as a nation. We are people who support and defend freedom for ourselves, also for our democratic allies around the world. And this is a really important part of our strength.
With all of that being largely, universally agreed upon among career foreign service diplomats in this country and among our traditional allies, you talked about giving advice and counsel to policymakers. Where do you think Donald Trump's advice and information is coming from if he reaches the opposite conclusion?
Well, I think that President Trump has a goal to end the war, but I do think there's this debate over how that war can be ended. And certainly from my perspective, it can't be ended by putting pressure on Ukraine as the victim. It could be ended by putting appropriate pressure on Russia, including additional sanctions on Russia together with the Europeans, especially on the energy sector and the oil and the things that are fueling Russia's war machine. I think we could also push to have released the $300 billion in Russian sovereign assets in Europe so that those can be used to help Ukraine defend itself, buying weapons even from the United States, which also would be an economic benefit for us and create jobs also here at home.
How do the Ukrainians navigate the Trump administration after that Oval Office confrontation?
Well, I think that the Ukrainians changed their efforts, changed tack a bit to navigate this relationship. I think it was a positive success to have the mineral agreement, which was recently signed. I think that is good for us to have an economic partnership. But any U.S. company that's investing in Ukraine needs security. So the thing that's the most important to figure out in terms of trying to end the war and have a peace is security for Ukraine. And that can help to have a just and lasting peace. But that needs to be supported together with Europeans.